So first, I work for Comcast, and the best way for me to meet people that I work with is to find them at events like this. So if you work for Comcast, please self-identify. I didn't think I saw any of you. I see some Time Warner people, so soon enough. Okay, right? All right, so a little bit about me. I've been with Comcast for 11 years. I am a tequila aficionado, and I am a beer snob, admittedly. I like dogs, I like golf, and I like camping. I'm also a Scrum guy. So I have CSP certification. If you want to talk process, we can. I don't think anyone in this room really wants to, but if you do, that's your pain. And I'm a developer. So who in here is a developer? And I don't mean like an ops developer, but like a software developer, enterprise stuff. Okay? I feel your pain. Before I start talking about using virtual resources, who's using them today? Who's managing their user base with virtual resources? Nobody. Okay, so there are 136,000 employees at Comcast as of December of 2013. Not all of them are managed in Puppet, fortunately. But, so before I start talking about this, I would like to first talk about why. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to use Puppet to manage our user base? Why do we even want to use Puppet? And I think you've heard a lot of that earlier today. So if you're new to Puppet, this is a look at my group. And I'm in a pure development organization. We're really good at writing software. We're really good at writing our middle tier. We're really good at writing persistent stuff. And we absolutely suck at putting it on servers, right? Or configuring a server, or doing anything that has to do with how we're going to run it. So a couple of years ago, we decided that we would use Puppet to manage that infrastructure. We're a group of developers. We have absolutely no ops, no sysadmins. We have nothing like that. So every bit of pain that we've been through, and if you're a developer going through this pain, then just know it gets better. It's been talked about, but I put this in just in case I was going first. But this is how we use it. So let's get on with it. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. First, the bane of your existence, the error duplicate declaration, and then a little bit about how. So this will be a little bit more showing you how to do it, more so than telling you why you should do it. But let's look at this first. So how many times have you seen this error? Is it 100 times? Is it 100,000 times? Right? Like, it can happen for any kind of resource. This is a nightmare if you've got modules where there's even a tweenth of overlap, right? So one way to work through this is to use Hira. You're hearing a lot about Hira today, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit at the end if I have time. But even then, it can sometimes be iffy. Right, so if you've got package declarations in two different Hira files and they overlap, then you're going to get a duplicate on package instead. So I'm also admittedly a Denver Broncos fan, so instead of showing you what I do at Comcast, I have these contrived examples that use the Denver Broncos roster. So this is how you get a duplicate declaration error. So what's going to happen when this guy gets applied, it's going to fail because I've got the same user defined in two different classes being included here. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm kind of up and down with the mic. All right, thanks. So let's look at another example. What's going to happen here, right? Like, it's not an identical resource. So, and if you don't mind me picking on Eli Manning a little bit, is this going to work? Are you going to have two users? Are you going to have a race condition? Or is it just going to fail? The answer is it's going to fail, right? And the reason it fails is because the title of the resource has to be unique. So I'm going to talk for just a minute about uniqueness. On the next slide, I think there's a big wall of text about how Puppet Labs defines uniqueness. But just know that this is the title. It's the name var for the user type. So if you don't put a name, and don't read this, I'm going to summarize it on the next slide. But this is what Puppet Lab says about uniqueness. But it really all boils down to this. You've heard this already today. Your resource declaration really represents what you want to be on the server. So if you want two users named Manning, find a way to do that. If you don't, then don't. Because Puppet would rather fail and do nothing than do something that's potentially bad for your file system. if you meant to do it. You can accidentally do bad things like you heard earlier, rm-rf/star, that's probably not good. But if all your declarations describe the same desired state, it might seem harmless and it might be a head scratcher, but a lot of times the duplicates that you get are slightly different. So would this work? I mean, if now the title's different, there's enough about them that's different. And when I classify a node with this profile as player's offense, NFL player offense, is this going to put both of those guys on there? Yeah, it'll work. But, one of the things that I hate as a developer is refactoring. So I've made changes to 2 users that are on an NFL roster. How many more players do I need to change their definition for to have a consistent user base now? Well, let's see, there's 32 teams, there's 53 players on the active roster, there's 10 people on 32 practice squads, there's coaching staffs, there's former players, Hall of Famers, there's a whole lot of refactoring that I have to do just because I wanted to add 1 letter to 2 different resource declarations. And that's probably not what I wanted to do, right? So, what I'm here to talk about is that there's a better way. So, if this is new to you, then hopefully you'll get something out of this. If this is not new to you, hopefully it's a good refresher. And if I say something wrong, just please raise your hand and tell me that I'm wrong. So what I want to talk about now is, I call it syntactic splendid because it's just not quite as good as the real thing. So let's look at that. So this is where we stopped, right? This will work, but what about all the other places that you want to include paid managers as a user? All of these classes are places where he probably should be, including guys named Peyton at the very bottom. So you may have defined him hoping that these would always be exclusively used, but if I ever needed any 2 of these, I could never use them all together. So, we have a concept of taking that user and making him virtual. So you've seen the exported resource earlier. I thought that was great. A single @ symbol is how you identify a resource virtually. So before we go too much deeper though, I'd like to have a brief aside about the use of the @ symbol. It has an official name, 2 official names in English. They are both pretty stupid. The @% and the aspirand, according to Wikipedia, which we know is always full of truth. But it has better names in other languages, right? Including the German Klammeraffe, which means hanging monkey or spider monkey. So, call it what you will. Or in French, it used to be le petit escargot, which means small snail. But, younger generations are adopting just calling it the @ symbol, and I blame the English language for that. So, my apologies to anyone to whom English is not their first language. So where were we? So if I virtualize this user declaration, I put it in all these classes, did I fix it? If I did, then do you think I would be here telling you to just use the @ symbol and then go sit down? Right? So hopefully not. The answer is no, I didn't really fix it. So when you make a user virtual, they're not actually going to be part of your catalog unless you do some more work. So I'm going to show you what that is in a minute. But also, if I put this @user in every single one of these classes, is that going to work when I need to use that user more than once? Some of you who know that that's not going to work either, right? Because, like we talked about earlier, there is the concept of uniqueness. And I'll get to that in a minute. When you use a virtual resource, you can basically virtualize any resource that you can declare input. Some of them make sense, a lot of them make sense, and some of them don't, right? This is just here to show you that you can basically virtualize anything. Today we're going to focus on the user. We're going to look at one other type, this type. So could you virtualize this? So this is called, if those of you who've never seen this, who has never seen this before? Like, okay, I see a few hands. So this is called a define-based resource. And if you're a developer, it's essentially a method, right? Nothing more than that. Can you virtualize this? The answer is yes, you can. And this is how you do that right here. So if I say an instance of this, so I'm in the accounts class, and my define is called local user. So I will take a virtual instance of the account local user, and I will call it pigmenting. I'm applying some tags here, and I'll show you why later. But one thing that's important is that you still have to have a unique name, a unique title, or a unique name var for all of your resources, even if you declare them virtually. So what you have here is I'm bringing in the define, and this is where I'm using it. And I would have a long list of these, maybe in this class. Questions so far? Sir?
Is this a good way to synchronize, say, you're managing users in Puppet, but is the source of truth on your user something like Active Directory or some other basic?
That's a very good question. It could be. You could create local users here, maybe that aren't bound to the same requirements that you have for your AD users, or if you're on an NT domain like NT account users. You can have the same usernames here, but I don't see that too often.
Why would Puppet links argue that this is a bad way of doing it, declaring the definition inside a class? I know that if you run Puppet lint against that, it'll tell you. It'll give you a warning, basically.
That's a very good question. I do not know. Why? So you're saying like up here, this is bad?
Yeah, it says you defined a definition inside a class. Don't do that.
Never seen that before. I'm not doubting you, but we use define based types inside of classes all the time.
That's why I just
Yeah.
don't know why.
Yeah, maybe that'll be a question for the Puppet Labs guys to answer a little bit later. Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's move on. So what I wanted to show next is how do you actually use this user? If you want to make it real, there's a couple ways to do it. But first, you understand that now that you've taken a concrete instance of the user class and made it virtual here, the way to get it applied to a catalog, included in a catalog or a configuration for a server, there's two ways, but the simplest way is to use the realize function. Oops, wrong way, sorry. That's what I get for having a clicker. So this is, if I want to put one person on, I can use this realize function. Notice the path here, these classes are capitalized. So that means this is a type level function, right? So I'm not only operating on an instance of this type, which is an account local user. I'm operating on the entire collection of that type. So anything that is defined as an account's local user resource would be affected by this declaration here. That becomes really important when you are dealing with files or packages or some other types, built-in types. And just syntactically, if you're going to do more than one of these, you can put them in parentheses and make a list. I think this is good, but this, how long is that list going to be when you've got 53 times 32 plus 320 users in there that you need in a specific class? Like if I wanted the whole NFL to be part of whatever I'm doing in this class or in this module, that's still a big long list, and that's really not helping me very much in terms of how much refactoring I've got to do. So if we have our virtual local user definition of Peyton's user, and we've got the virtual class here where we're realizing it, then problem solved for these things? Yes, but, right? And Success Kit tells you that this will work because you can realize a virtual user as many times as you want in a configuration. And on the compile side, it will know that it needs to include it just one time in the catalog. So let's take another look though. So if you put that realize function in every class, and I just took the first 3 off of this list here. Sorry about that. Aren't you recreating the same duplication problem that you had in the first place? The answer really is no. It's not a duplication error. Like I was just saying, you can put the virtual resource, as long as you only define this guy once, you can include a realization of that guy as many times as you need throughout your catalog. It's not going to overlap. It will overlap, but during the catalog compilation, it gets normalized into a single instance.
Question.
Sorry.
So is a defined-based resource, could that be like considered an abstract class? And you're making concrete classes and maybe extending them in an object?
You could think of it that way.
Okay.
So in your defined-based type, you can have a lot of implementation stuff. So, and just to share with you what I do in a type like this is I create the user's home directory. I path out their SSH stuff. I put their SSH key in, set their permissions on their home directories, things like that.
It's all in one place?
Yeah. So I put that all in a custom type because it doesn't really, you could do, you could certainly do a bunch of file resources and stuff inside of a module and then just have the users added at the end. But I just thought it's a little bit cleaner when you have the name of the user already running through. So that's why we have a defined-based type for it. And I'll actually show it to you if we have time. Just some of the things that I do there. I tried to make this demo code relatively good, but there's some places where there's some detail lacking, so I'll be happy to show it to you. We talked about refactoring. Essentially, this moves the problem, right? So using the realize statement moves the problem from having to be careful about where you declare your users to having to refactor this list. So every time I have a new user, I'm going to have to change my realize list in every single module where I need that new user if I'm using the realize function. And that, let me tell you, is a real pain in the butt, especially if you have a wide code base. In our Puppet code base, we probably have 90 to 100 modules, and we have about 400 users. So this doesn't really scale to that level, and if you have more than that, then it really isn't going to scale to yours either. So there is, I said there's 2 ways to realize users. This is the other way. We talked about a spaceship. This is the spaceship operator. It is also the collection operator. It was really hard to find a picture of a spaceship that actually looks like the spaceship operator. So the quality is really poor, so I apologize for that. I recommend using this in almost every situation because here's some syntax for it, but because it is searchable and it is groupable, and you can lump users together by common properties that you can define for them. So just know if you are new to this, if you put the spaceship operator and it's empty, every virtual resource of this type will get realized in your catalog. So I have made this mistake many times and had to crash and burn a VM because I didn't want to remove the users one by one. So it is searchable. So anywhere that you have a specific parameter in your type, if it has this value, then it'll be included. So the other thing you should know though is that there's some simple Boolean logic with and or, but it really only understands equality and inequality. So you can have this equal to A and not equal to B. That'll work, but it's not going to really do a whole lot of logic inside of it. So these would be parameters that would be on your type as it's defined or as it's declared. Those are really the only logic tests that are permitted. Just seeing if I have any more in my notes to say here, because I'm kind of going pretty fast through this. If a parameter is part of the type reference, like the password parameter for a user, but not specified in a virtual user declaration, the query against the password parameter is syntactically okay, but probably not very useful. But if a user type gets queried for a parameter that's not normally in the user type, like command from the file type, then this query will fail. Silently, I think, but it will fail. So let's put it to use now. First, let's look at our example. So we've got this defined base virtual resource for our user payment. And below that, there's two statements to do the exact same thing. Although the compiler would actually let us do this, with both of these statements here, this particular example is not very useful because it's only realizing one user, right? Where the power of the collection operator comes is when you have multiple results returned from this query string. So you can see here, right? I'm matching on title. Matching on title is not very useful for a collection because title has to be unique. So another example, and hopefully this will start to make sense. These are different guys, but they have a tag value of Broncos, right? We talked earlier, or you heard earlier, about metaparameters and how they're good. Tag is one of those metaparameters as well. It's not part of the type. It's not part of the user type, so you can apply it to anything. It's normally used to help separate like code that you may wish to run. And I've got another example of that later. But I like using it in this way. So if I have 1,000 users and, converting this to a real example, 10 of them are DBAs, I'd have a DBA tag here, right? And then when I realize them, I would have DBA here.
Can you use regular expressions on the right-hand side of the filter condition?
Over here?
Yes.
I don't think so, but it's possible. So it's the only test that it allows are equality or inequality. So a regex with full equality is not a very good regex, right? Or not a very useful one.
Yeah, right. Defines one.
It may be good, but not very useful. So this is the power of the spaceship operator. This is what I wanted to show you guys today. So when we add that tag, so all virtual resources will be here. Specifically with user resources, another common thing to use here is a group. So if you, the way you manage users, if you put them in groups, like if you have a DBA group or a developer group, because group is a first-class parameter in the user type, it's a pretty common occurrence to use that as a searchable field. The way it works for us is we all, at Comcast, is we all belong to one group, which gives us different permissions on machines. And then we use tags to identify ourselves. Why this is good is now when you're going to refactor your user base, when you're going to add or drop a user, you don't have to go into every module and change your query. You just change the tag value on that user. This is, for me as a developer, this is a lot more refactoring friendly. And, I had that big trouble in Little China picture up earlier. A lot less of that happening when all I have to change is maybe a couple of values and a couple of tags. Even 100 of these is better than visiting every module one by one. Was there a question?
You do multiple tags.
How do you do multiple tags?
Yeah, so could you do like call after that and just say like matrix too?
Yes, you could. Yeah, you would put a logical and in there. So it would be Broncos and, or you could put a or.
Okay.
So it understands a little bit of logic like that. Yeah. Other questions so far?
Sir.
Player changes teams, basically goes to
So easily, I would change the value of the tag from Broncos to Texans. It would not. So I would have a separate module that would do something like that. Probably some exec statement to remove a user, or if this has a correlation to what group they're in, maybe I would change their group. This is a contrived example, so not a very good one, but a solid point. I think kind of corollary to that, if I'm a web developer and a DBA, for example, and I belong to two different things. The reason we need this virtualization is so that when you apply a class for both of those to the same machine, when you classify a machine that way, you won't get the duplication that you would get otherwise. So, yeah, I wouldn't do it in the same module. I would have a different module to do that. that answer your question, or?
Yeah.
Okay, ask me again and I'll give you a better answer if you have a more specific question.
No, I think
Okay. Just here to share, so if you have questions, then please ask. So if we look at our previous example where we had all the realize statements, you can apply the collection operator here to accomplish more with a lot less code. So, the only hard one here is, Manning got snubbed for a Heisman in the 90s. So maybe you would have some of these values theoretically, which you could use to put, him and all of the other snubs in that group. Really what I want to show here is there's some logic that you can apply. And instead of having this statement that recognizes one user, you would have this statement that recognizes all of them that match this. So that's kind of it. You want to use, Success Kid says, please use the spaceship. I do have a little bit on the spaceship operator that's beyond this. So, you can't declare the same resource twice, but you can add attributes to an already declared resource in a different module. So this is a little bit beyond managing users, but I have about 10 minutes of time left, so I'm going to go through this really quick. In normal circumstances, an idiom like this, you would only be able to add previously unmanaged attributes on a resource. So what I'm saying here is, I have this file in some, it's foo.sh, and in some module I have that, but I want to add these other properties to it somewhere else. So by reference, I'm amending it. An exception to, so using this syntax, the by reference syntax, you can change these if whatever class this in inherits this one. With the spaceship operator, it's a little different. So I have a note here because it is a very powerful thing, because the spaceship operator ignores inheritance in this way. It ignores it ignores inheritance. So what we talked about here, this syntax implicitly realizes any virtual resource that matches this. So if I have this guy, this file is going to match, but if I have any other files, they will also match, right? And it's not going to care that you only meant this one file. And if you have multiple places where these things, so if this base class inherits something else that also has this file in it, then you may run into a race condition, and the last update of these values is the one that will be applied. So it can be powerful to use, but please use it with caution. So I have more on this if you're interested, but it's come see me after, because it's a little out of scope for what I wanted to cover. The last piece is a little bit about how I model users. The very, very short version is do what feels right. Okay. There are hundreds, of possibilities of ways to do this. I'm only going to show you one that I'm not a great fan of and one that I do like. So one way you can do this is by grouping users into files. And if you guys can't see this, I'm sorry. So you can have different, manifests here where you can lump these users into groups by what kind of group they would be in, and then put your declarations here. This is one way to do it. It's certainly valid. I don't really like this because, if I have a person who belongs here and belongs here, or, a developer who's also a Linux admin, where do I put them? If I put them in both, I'm going to get an error when I pull all of these guys forward, or I pull all of these guys forward, if I ever need both of them on the same machine. So I don't really like that. If you can keep your users completely segregated, then that's good, because it's relatively simple. The other way that and this is the way that I like to do this. You're hearing a lot about roles and profiles today. And I heard someone say earlier that they love and hate roles and profiles, and I couldn't agree more. I tend to recommend this model. When you add user realizations in the different profiles, that ensures that the profile is describing the servers that these profiles describe and ultimately get applied to through a role, they're going to have all of the users that you need. If you use a collection operator here to realize your users, then the upkeep on the profiles themselves becomes relatively negligible, other than wholesale changes that you may be making, like upgrading or adding, or if you, like you saw earlier, if you have way too many parameters in your profile, maybe slimming that down back into whatever the standard mod says makes sense. Let me find my notes, sorry. Put an implementation class in a profile. Typically you use have it on the next slide. Typically you use the class syntax rather than the include syntax in a profile. Typically, and this is how you would apply it. This is just an example of what I was just saying. Here we're including our virtual user class, realizing relevant group here. Lets us keep our definitions out of the actual implementation. I like this because you get a lot more portability out of your actual implementation modules. If you want to put something on the forge, don't put your users in it, please. Okay. The other thing I like to do in profiles is I like to do all of my higher lookups in the profile. Because if I have my higher lookups in my implementation module and you want to use it, guess what? You have to use higher or you're going to rewrite it. So please don't do that. Please put it here. You don't have to share your profiles. You probably won't be sharing your profiles because you're going to have some public stuff and you're probably going to have some private stuff in your profiles that's specific to your company or your department or just you if you're doing it by yourself, sitting at a desk in a dungeon where the sun doesn't shine like I did for 3 years. And the other piece here is a little bit about how you would model this, because I hear questions all day today about modeling this. So if this is my profile and it looks like this, maybe I need a base class, maybe I know I need a JDK to run Oracle, and I have an implementation class that installs it. If I want to put down the Oracle role on a server, I need that role, but maybe I need other stuff as well. A Nagios module separate from that. Other stuff, Aricent, if you have a CMDB that pulls data from Aricent. And then here's how you would actually put that role to use in your node definition. So if you're not using Hiera, it probably looks something more like this. And here's a regex match to the FQDN of that server, or that group of servers. So I'm saying, if I want to run an a la carte module, run it. Otherwise, run the role. So that would be this role. If I'm not using Hiera, then you wouldn't have this. But if I was using Hiera, I would just have this in my YAML file. And system role, that could be a custom fact that tells you in your hierarchy, like how should I classify this node. So this would be a fact that exists on the server. So when the compiler runs plugin sync, would pick this up along with the facts. And then, if I have location as another fact, that would help me identify exactly what, perhaps I've got IP separation, which IP addresses to apply. Run this class, install these packages, and, you can have other stuff in your Hiera data file. I know you've seen that a couple times already today. So I don't want people logging in as root over SSH. That's just a thing. That's kind of the end of my chat. Are there other questions that haven't been asked thus far? Sir. I recommend it for non-production environments where, so what we do at Comcast is our production environments do have a serious backend for managing permissions. It's almost too restrictive in what it allows us to do. And it's, it pulls Active Directory, and then it's a two-factor authentication to get onto any of those machines. In our lab environments and in our pre-production environments, we don't have that same control. So we don't have the same bindings for users that we would have. We can have them in like a staging environment, which is non-prod, but when we want to roll a dev or a test environment, this is when I would use them. I don't recommend it for using in a production setting. But, so my experience here, and maybe I should have said this at the outset, is as a developer doing stuff in dev environments, this is where this came to pass. It's a very good question. If you couldn't hear the question was, why would I do this? Because we should have a better backend for managing users. I completely agree. Are there other questions? I use all SSH keys. Yes, I use all SSH keys.
How do you rotate the keys?
How do I rotate the keys? I only do this in non-prod environments, so I don't rotate the keys. Other questions? Okay, I'll be hanging out for a little while if you have stuff or you want to see something that I touched on but didn't cover in great detail. Thanks for your attention. I hope this was informative.